There are so many movies out there that so many people have seen, and there are so many people reviewing them. People like me on YouTube. People much better than me on YouTube. Even the real classic film critics who still talk about them on TV and in publications. Nothing, no matter how obscure, gets released without anyone talking about it. So you would think that when a movie is released that is a shameless ripoff of one that was released only 13 years before, that someone would catch it. Someone would go, holy shit, this isn't just familiar, this is the same thing. And yet, in this case, no one has. There is not a single article, video, or Reddit page describing in any kind of detail the plain and simple fact that Hoodlum ripped off the Cotton Club so blatantly, without trying to hide any part of it, that Francis Ford Coppola would have been within his rights to sue Bill Duke. I'm not joking. These films are both based on real-life events and people, and of course you can't claim creative control over real life, but they are so similar that there's no way that this isn't plagiarism. So to those of you who have seen both the Cotton Club and Hoodlum, because I know you're out there, I just want to say, I know. I know it feels like you're the only one who knows, but you're not. Somewhere out there, beneath the pale moonlight, someone's watching these movies and going, how did nobody catch this tonight? But I did. So let's briefly discuss why Hoodlum was a shameless ripoff of the Cotton Club to the point where a lawsuit could have and probably should have occurred. And to do that, we must first discuss the difference between a ripoff and common tropes found in storytelling. Just because two movies share the same tropes or even the same basic premise does not mean that one ripped off the other. For example, I love Dances with Wolves and I loathe Avatar. But I wouldn't say Avatar ripped off Dances with Wolves just because the premise is the same. The narrative of the colonizer going native predates Dances with Wolves. It didn't invent that story. A Bug's Life was inspired by The Magnificent Seven, which is a well-known remake of Seven Samurai. Does this mean A Bug's Life ripped off these movies? No. The narrative of a team of brave men defending a helpless village from bandits is, again, one that predates all of these. Then, of course, there's movies that are based on true stories, which have to have an obligatory scene no matter how different they're trying to be. Take Hoffa and The Irishman. These films are inevitably similar in some ways because Jimmy Hoffa is a character in both of them, and so both films have a scene where he gets killed. This does not mean that The Irishman ripped off Hoffa. It is common knowledge that Hoffa was killed by the mob, and so in a movie about his life or his death, you have to have that scene. The important thing is that these scenes look and feel different. But once a certain number of similarity boxes are checked off, that's when things become plagiaristic. So here are my issues with Hoodlum. Hoodlum actually does not exactly tell the same basic story as the Cotton Club, but it feels the same while retelling important parts of the Cotton Club. Both films have the same setting, characters, and even scenes. It's not like both films just happen to take place in the Cotton Club. Hoodlum reshot some of the same fucking scenes as the Cotton Club with different actors, except in one case, which makes this film even more bizarre and actually creates a paradox about this movie that I can't wrap my head around. One of these characters is played by the same actor in both films, Lawrence Fishburne. Yes, Lawrence Fishburne plays Bumpy Johnson in both of these movies, which means that these films could have just taken place in the same universe and told different stories, but they don't. The movie is not a different story that takes place in the same universe. It's just the same story with different actors. But it also can't be a remake because Lawrence Fishburne plays Bumpy Johnson in both movies. So what the fuck is it? If it's neither of these things, then what the fuck is this movie? It doesn't tell the exact same story as the first one, and Dutch Schultz is played by two different actors in two different ways, and he's doing completely different things in both films, but the fact that Lawrence Fishburne plays the same character in both films while every other actor was switched out, but nearly everything else about this film is a recycling of the Cotton Club, this had to be an extremely poorly thought out ripoff. There's nothing else it could be. This wasn't Bill Duke's own vision. He clearly watched The Cotton Club and decided to literally reshoot scenes from it, cast one of the main actors from it in the same role, and just put the focus more on the gangsters than on the musicians. But the problem is that The Cotton Club still focused very heavily on the gangsters, and so there's essentially nothing we see in Hoodlum that isn't in The Cotton Club. The setting and characters are all the same. It doesn't define itself so differently from The Cotton Club that it feels completely separate, and the fact that Lawrence Fishburne is in both movies playing the same character and nobody gave a shit about this makes my fucking head explode. This is a unique thing in cinema that rarely ever happens. An actor playing the same character in more than one film, but the second film is not a sequel to the first. There was only one other time I can think of where this might have happened, when Peter O'Toole played Henry II in both Beckett and The Lion in Winter. But there's a difference. The Lion in Winter, which takes place around 15 years after Beckett and deals with an entirely new struggle in Henry's life, actually became a de facto sequel to Beckett. It does not reshoot any scene from Beckett. It completely works as a sequel even if it wasn't marketed or even originally intended as one. Henry II is one of the very few recurring characters, and although Eleanor of Aquitaine was in Beckett, and played by a woman who was not Katharine Hepburn, she had such little screen time that it doesn't mess with anyone's headcanon. Hoodlum is caught in this weird limbo of being not a sequel or a remake, just a weird reshooting of The Cotton Club. Which, by the way, is a way better movie. I haven't really touched on which of these films is objectively better than the other, but it's The Cotton Club. I did watch Hoodlum first, interestingly enough, and thought it was pretty good when I saw it. The ice cream scene is a legitimately suspenseful scene. Tim Roth's performance as Dutch Schultz is better than good, but then I watched The Cotton Club and it all just fell apart. The Cotton Club feels more put together. It does this thing where it tells a gangster story while also telling the story of struggling performers, but it made both really interesting. A lot of films and shows that take place in the 1920s and 30s seem to not know how to use the music from that era in the film. But in this movie, Coppola actually did. On top of that, the cast is awesome, the plot's exciting, the dance scenes are really, really good and don't overstay their welcome. It's leagues above Hoodlum, which is fitting, because Hoodlum is a goddamn ripoff. That's really all I had to say. Guys, thanks for watching this dumbass quickie. Please like, subscribe, and throw $1 into the Patreon bucket. Peace.